G'day, Steve Morgan here, Fishing Monthly magazines and Australian bass tournaments, and this is my long-term review of the PowerPole Move electric motor. Been using power poles themselves on my boat for a long time. I've got two of the white 8-foot blades on the back at the moment. I run a PowerPole Charge in the back of my boat, which is a DC to DC battery management system, which I'm loving because it keeps the batteries all topped up as I'm running during the day. And this was the latest addition to the ecosystem. We first ran into the Move at the Bassmaster Classic in Knoxville, Tennessee in 2023, and you can see some cutaways here of this ultra powerful small armature, small head motor in the test tanks there, impressing people as they were walking past. And in fact, we got to first feel the power of that motor, which I assume was on 36 volt setup at that show. And ever since then, I've been itching to try and get one on my boat. Well, it finally arrived in spring for us last year, and I've put it through its paces on both bream, bass, and barramundi events. So that's across fresh and salt water and from fish that range from this big to about 1.20 m or 4 feet long. And I really love the motor. The main reason I love the motor, and this has got nothing to do with any of the technology inside it, is the weight of the motor. It only weighs in the low 20 kilograms. And this Basscat Pantera Classic that I've got it on, it's very weight sensitive in the front of the boat. If you're a Basscat driver, you know that they're popping up onto the last part of the pad. With my previous motors, and I've run Ultrexes and Garmin Forces, I've never run a Lowrance Ghost, I've run Motor Guides, I've run nearly all the brands of motors. Most of the modern brushless motors are really heavy, and that's not a bad thing if you're in a boat that that likes a lot of weight on the front. But this boat doesn't like weight on the front. So by reducing the weight on the front, I've noticed I can run different propellers on my boat, get different performance, better economy out of my hull. The second thing I was excited about PowerPole building an electric motor was the fact that their after-sales service is legendary all over the world. You know, back when I bought PowerPoles off Josh Battison when he first brought them in at least 10 to 15 years ago, if there was ever a problem, there would be a FedEx free part, even when the motor's out of warranty, turn up at the office and the motor would be fixed as quickly as humanly possible. And they've achieved that reputation after years and years of looking after their customers long term. So I was really excited to see what they could do in the electric motor space. That's not to say that other companies don't look after their people, but I just know that PowerPole have been really cool at that. Thirdly, I've already had some brushless electric motors. I'm big on sound underwater. So I've done reviews before of the hydro nuts that go on the end of the electric motor propellers to try and reduce noise. We've had hydrophones under the water and worked out that that basically makes no difference at all. There's a link to that down in the comments to that review. But what I did learn with the hydrophone underwater was that the old brushed style electric motors are quite noisy, and it's not even a linear relationship. They get noisier and noisier the faster and faster you go. At around 10 to 30% of capacity, the motors were still reasonably quiet. But after that, they got really loud. The brushless electrics are a lot quieter underwater. Still noisy and still have the hydrodynamic noise that they make underwater. But using this motor on under that 50% range, I find that I don't spook many fish at all. I was always big with the older brushed motors on keeping your electric motor 30% and less, which means I always fish with the wind, I always fish with the current, I always make sure I'm minimizing boat noise while I'm handling it. The PowerPole Move, released last year, available in 2 iterations. This is the ZR, which I think is short for scissor. It's a scissor mount electric, the same as all of the cable steer electric motors that we've had for years and years. The other one's the PV, which is the pivot mount, and that is similar to like the Minn Kota Autopilot style of electric motor. So no matter if you've got like a low bass boat like this, that XR is perfect. If you've got a higher sided boat, want a longer shaft, then the pivot may be for you. Both of those motors use the same sort of architecture and everything except the mount, and they run on anywhere between 24 and 36 volts natively. You don't have to set anything to run it. It just sniffs the voltage and it uses it. That's not unusual as well. Like Garmin Forces do it. I think every brushless motor now sniffs the voltage and tells you exactly, gives you exactly the power that you need from that. This one is running on a very old lithium that I have. I have a near 8-year-old Torqeedo 24 volt 106 amp hour battery that at least 5 electric motors of mine have run off, and that gives this on my Garmin GPS map at the front. It tells me that I'm getting 28.5 volts, and I've only just put on the water, so it runs anywhere from 29 down to about 24 volts. The second part of the equation, I suppose, is this digital foot pedal. Now, I've just come out of 2 weeks of tournaments, 4 solid tournaments end on end, so it's all filthy, but this has been flawless this whole way through. It mimics the old style cable steer. So if you tick back, it turns one way. If you tick forward, it turns the other way. It's not a left and right thing. It's a front and back deal, but it's all digital. 2 main buttons on it. This one, which gives the speed, and it makes little noises as you go up and down, and you roll that with your foot. And this one, which is the momentary button, so you can tap on it for the motor to go to give power to the motor. And you can see as it's in spot lock here, it's actually moving just slightly to do it. Other parts of the system is this. This is a little digital readout at the front, which tells you how the power setting that your motor's on. That's on a scale of 0 to 20. When you're on 36 volts, it gives you 20. With this motor here, it gives you a maximum of 17. So it probably gives me 17/20ths or 85% of its maximum power with my 24 volt setup. It tells you if it's in spot lock, if it's on a vector heading. All the information you need is ready to hand there. And the last part, well, no, there's 2 more parts of the equation. You get remote spot lock buttons. So there's no spot lock button on this on the pedal here. It's remote. I've put it on my deck here, but you can have it here, there, anywhere in the boat. Last part of the equation is the pendant, which I suppose it puts together all of PowerPole's products. So it can control my power poles, the power poles up and down, and I've got them synchronized on here. It's got my spot lock feature, which is that red anchor. Got the vector heading feature, and it's got the jog features on there, and of course this one down here, which is pretty cool. It's a reverse feature, which lets you actually, without turning the motor 180 degrees, it lets you just back out of certain situations. So the other cool thing about this, and this is sort of a potted, it's a waterproof device. It has an inductive charging cable that you can mount in your boat that runs anywhere between 12 and 36 volts. So you can plug it into your trolling motor battery, your sounder batteries, your house battery. This thing just clips in the cradle, which means that every time that you go out to use it, it's always charged. So that was something that I thought was really cool. Always looking for my old remotes when they were around, and always looking for batteries for them because they'd always fail at an inopportune time. So that's the main parts of the system. In Australia, I got mine delivered to Min Repairs and Servicing, but there are PowerPole agents all over Australia and, of course, all over the world where you can order your products. And price range, these are at the top of the line when it comes to pricing. In Australia, 10,400 Australian dollars gets you one of these units, but you don't have to buy any of the accessories. You get everything you need: propeller, foot pedal, pendant, buttons, everything you're going to need. Now, if $10,000 is the highest, what does everything else cost in Australia? Well, the latest Minn Kota Quests are probably that $8,000 to $9,000 mark. The Garmins are at that $6,500 to $7,000 mark, and the Ghosts I think are around that same price point. So they are 10 to 30% dearer than whatever else is on the market. And whether you spend as much time as me on these things and think that's good value for money, I suppose that's up to you. Let's get to some of the on-water features. And the first thing that you notice about this motor is how quiet it is. Now, there are 2 components to that quietness. The first is the brushless motor, which gives you quiet underwater sound. But if you've used all the brands of electrics, you know that the steering components also can make a lot of sound. You hear that as they're going back and forth. I've had several brands, they all do it, not necessarily a bad thing, but the amenity on this motor is second to none. Knowing what's inside there, the little planetary gears are very quiet. They shed the load nicely. It's not just one little electric motor turning a pivot gear. It's a redesigned system, and it is really quiet on the water. It's the quietest that I've used in any of the electrics. Second thing I noticed on the water, and we're sitting here now doing it, is that spot lock is ridiculously accurate. I've got in the cutaways here some drone footage where we're just sitting here fishing this dock which is behind us, and I'm sitting the drone up there, I'm sitting the boat there. It's probably arguable whether the drone or the boat's GPS is working better because it is not moving all the way through. Now, one thing that the algorithms inside here do really well is you're not spinning that back and forwards all the time. With some of the brands I've had, it goes backwards, it goes forwards. There's a lot of degrees of movement in this. This one, tiny corrections, and away you go. So it's so you can see it happening in the background here, and it is as advertised. It is a very, very accurate system on the Spot-Lock. Thirdly is speed of steering, I suppose, and I suppose it's time we might get up and show this thing in action. It becomes intuitive. Anyone who uses the scissor mount electrics and the cable steer electrics, you know how to steer it. You're not having to look at it when you steer it. What I've found is, don't drive this thing around at full speed and not know where it's pointed. It could throw you out of the boat. Is it more powerful than the other electrics on the motor? I've come from a Garmin Force to this. I think they were about the same. They feel about the same to me, and that's probably because they both were running on 24 volts and I'm getting a certain amount of thrust out of them. Is it quieter than everything else? Yes. Is it more powerful? Arguable. It probably is if I put 36 volts on it. Idiosyncrasies with this motor. I have not spent the time to get my live scope and all my Hydrowave cables all sorted out yet. So I have to be careful of those when they go into the, when I put the boat in and out. I don't want to pinch the $2,000 transducer cables as we go. So I have to be careful putting it in and out, but that's not a PowerPole thing, that's a me thing. The other idiosyncrasies, I suppose, is when you're driving this in shallow water, you'll find that when you pull the motor to a certain height out of the water, it wants to go into a stow position, and you can set that stow position on your PowerPole app. So all of a sudden you can you go to pull that motor halfway out and drive with it in shallow drive, it wants to fight against you. I'm sure this is something they're going to fix in a software update, I think, down the track. But it hasn't fixed it yet. And so when I'm in shallow water trying to back out, I'm always sort of fighting that nature of this thing to want to turn at 90 degrees and stow itself. Like all motors, if I want to run it in shallow water, I can undo the collar. This collar here is very easy to undo and adjust the height of the motor. You don't have to reach under it. It happens right at the top. And I still have to put a little block of wood underneath if I want to get it into that ultra shallow water and keep that propeller in the water. So no changes with that. But can I get this boat in shallow water? Hell yeah, I can get this in real shallow water. It's designed with the lithium batteries. I've got jack plates on my motor. I can get this thing into about that much water and chase bream especially, and this is our saltwater fish, without any dramas. One of my criticisms of this motor is the fact that we do a lot of live scoping at night time for barramundi using the perspective mode on that Garmin there, and my transducer, of course, it's mounted on the shaft of that electric motor. Nowadays, no one seems to make motors that have any lights in the head of them. I have to get a big long Siloom stick and I have to tape it onto the head so I can see exactly which way my transducer is pointed. Now, someone out there, I'm sure, is good with 3D printing. Someone designed something so that I can cradle that Siloom stick in there and actually see how my perspective mode goes. It's a small thing, but at night time, I need that light on there to see where I'm going. Reliability wise, this has had a hiding, this motor. I have had no dramas apart from at the start. It used to interfere with the transducer that was on my Garmin on the shaft. I did my first software update and all of a sudden I had no interference anymore, and you can see now it doesn't interfere at all with it. I think that's something they got onto early and they fixed it, and I think any of the other complaints that I have about this are going to be addressed by software anyway. The titanium shaft on this, man, it's light, you can see it, it's not painted or anything. They reckon it's unbreakable. I haven't really tested that out. Hopefully I never get to test it out, but I have driven this boat through some real rough water, and I'm not afraid of this thing sort of deploying. It does come with its own little strap, so if I'm going through a rough water one, I will strap that motor down. But otherwise, when I'm just running from spot to spot in a tournament, I'm not too bothered about that. It's never really seems like it's going to deploy. Apart from that, there's not much to really talk about on this motor. It works. It's quiet. It's durable, it's got a great warranty, and you can see that it spot locks amazingly. So I'm not a guy that fishes on Spotlock a lot of time. I have all of my transducers, and for this one I have a Humminbird Megalive and a Garmin LiveScope mounted on it. It carries all of that paraphernalia well, and there's not much more that I can say about it. It's lasted 6 months. I haven't broken anything on it yet, and let's hope we can go the next several years without breaking anything. One thing that some people have commented on is the Spectra handle. It's like the world's thickest braid. It's not a wire. I have broken plenty of the wire ones in the past. It does scuff a little bit. I've got scuffs on it there, but I think it is not worrying about it's not going to break anytime soon. In fact, I'll be able to see if it breaks. A lot of my other ones sneak up on you, and the wire's broken in the short term. So Spectra might not look 100%, but performing 100% at the moment. Any more information you want, visit PowerPole's website. It's quite comprehensive, lots of how-to videos, etc. And if you're in Australia, the two people to buy it off at the moment, Manning River Marine and Troy at Min Repairs and Servicing. Let's hope you see you with a PowerPole move on the water one day.